I'm Mr. Rosansky, and this is a speed run of Practice Test 8, the first module, the A module, the medium one. And let's get started with this beaut. The first conventions question leads us to 16, so let's start there. I'm going to check for my omega conventions, and I see verbs. I've got a singular, I've got a both, I've got a singular, and I've got a both. So I'm going to consider that this is a shifts in verb tense. All I'm going to consider is the first one first. I've got a present, I've got a past, I've got a present, and I've got the future. I know that they love confusing kids with the perfect aspects, so I would bias an odd man out and go looking for clues, though. I see by the end of the 1990s, which is a past, and I know I'm just going to pick my had doubled, not even having to engage with anything else. Ooh, don't leave it on A. Had doubled conventions. I'm going to see if I have any omega considerations, and I have something weird here. I have verb and pronouns. Now, where do I start? You could start anywhere and you'd end up in the same place. I know that it's not like a verb question just because they're all the past. In terms of their number, they all agree with their subject, be it or they or some or were. So I'm just going to consider on which pronoun to use. But if you did it the other way, that's fine. You'll just recognize these shapes eventually. So focusing on the it, I've got a singular, I've got a they, which is plural, I've got a this, which is singular, and I got a some, which is plural. Interesting. I don't know what to bias as my odd man out, so I go looking for the antecedent. The who or what is the it or they. I find that the who or what of the it or they is this italicized thing. Now, I notice it's two things. This and is putting two things. If I didn't notice that immediately, this colon would show that I'm talking about two memorable woodcuts. And from here, I know what the answer is, right? You can't have sum of two because that's, well, just one. Therefore, they is the only one that it could be. A, C, and D are all presenting the wrong number. So conventions, what pops here? I see the omega convention X name, X title name. So I go looking to see what we've got. We've got two names together, and we've got our title here. We've got no researchers before it. So I'm going to initiate strat, not pick this, and ooh, here's where it's interrupting it. This is what I want. The researchers haven't been mentioned. Double check. Everything's fine, and I move on. Conventions question, I'm going to check for my omega considerations. These seem to be a transitions question. So the first thing that I'm going to do is check for a complete sentence on either side of this. I look to the left. Scott Heron himself resisted the Godfather nickname. That's fine. I totally have a CS to the left. Then I go looking to the right side, feeling that it didn't encapsulate his devotion to the broader African American blues tradition as well as blues artists, the moniker he preferred. Not a complete sentence. Your vibes, as long as you read to the end, right, start to finish, your vibes aren't going to like this as a complete sentence. This fails. Therefore, B and D fall. Then I consider where the contrast is. A is presenting that the contrast is somewhere between this blue section and somewhere between this pink section. If I were to choose C, the contrast is between yellow and blue. So I'm going to start with the start first. Even though journalists have dubbed him this thing, Scott Heron resisted the name. So it's going to be C that accesses contrast in the spot that it's going to be. If we want an explanation before I move on as to why there's not a complete sentence to the right, it's because that is starting a dependent clause. So feeling isn't operating as a gerund. We never get its payoff to make it have its verb. And this is a dependent clause over here, even though there is not its relative pronoun. That sneaky stuff. But grammar's pretty base. Conventions. I see what kind of omega conventions popped, and it's tempting to say this is the complete sentence mix-up, but it's not. Wile's not one of our fanboys. You could treat it as such, and I think that you would get the right answer. However, nothing pops here. Our strats don't work for the omega conventions. We've got nothing for consistency. We've got nothing for equivalence. Therefore, we are on the final four. I like to start with the colon as a consideration. Is the right side exemplifying the left after we check for a complete sentence to the left of the colon? The number of jams available for tasting varied, period. Gorgeous. Then I look to the right side. Is the right side an example of the variation of number? And it absolutely is. I pick this launch and I move on. If you did something else, I still think you would land on this answer. You would find something weird about the while being contrast because there isn't contrast between here and here. It's an example of. But just keeping it real on the strats. Conventions, let's check for another omega consideration. I do see a semicolon. I peek the semicolon. I don't have a complex list. Therefore, once again, no omega consideration pops. We've got nothing for 2, nothing for 3, so we're on the final 4. In the final 4 steps, I like going after colons or semicolons first because they're grammatical. So I consider maybe this semicolon is joining two complete sentences, and I look for evidence of that. I've got use of the term referenced, practice of repackaging successful narrative. Absolutely. I've got the use of the term referenced. I've got a complete sentence to the left. Then I check the right side. Even shows that varied only slightly from other shows. Got my subject here. Still and my verb here. I have a complete sentence on the left, a complete sentence on the right, and the only item that can join these two complete sentences is the semicolon in B. So complete sentence mix-up principles apply. Check for complete sentence on either side, but we did it by accessing the final four. Most logical transition. That was one of the oddest ones that we've experienced, but it's all right. We can handle anything. Transition question, I go looking the migration. I'm going to ignore the contrast there because that's present between these two clauses and just focus on this one. We're buried deeply in rich rock. Many had given up their fortune. Because it was buried deeply in rock, many had given up their fortune. I'm looking for cause and effect, not this, not contrast. Consequently, is going to be the relationship between these two buttes that I'm looking for. Their research was extremely influential in the fight against CFS. It laid the foundation. This seems to provide what the foundation is. I know it's not contrast. It lays the foundation for the treaty. We're not dealing with contrast. It's not earlier. It's saying the thing that it did. Sequence. It's specific. This is a specific instance of this is the thing specifically that it did. Avoid the example of this. The order they became states. The order. So which one first, which one second? Alaska, the 49th state, became a state several months. This is giving me sequence. I love that. We don't have any instance of when the order of the states. That gives a date, though. The 49th did so in the same year. That doesn't give me order, but it gives me year. Let's put it on the table to see if this is factual. Alaska is the 49th state. Alaska is the 49th state. Several months before. Absolutely. A is true. C false. The same day that Hawaii became a state? No. We don't know anything about order. A is going to be the right answer. Contrast the emissivity with the, sneaky. So it's emissivity versus emissivity. We want to contrast the emissivity, plug in this pronoun for its antecedent, emissivity versus emissivity. We want to contrast that. Let's get to it. A is saying the ability of reflective metal fibers to emit heat was determined by the emissivity. No. This is just a statement about how emissivity was arrived, but I have no idea about the contrast between them. The amount of heat a material absorbs is equal. This seems to be a definition for what I would imagine is emissivity. Not going to be it. Though the reflective metal fibers and silicon fibers had different rates, so that is contrast. He planned to use both, maybe. Whereas, good start for contrast, the reflective metal fibers had an emissivity of 0.02. The silicon carbide fibers had a different emissivity. So I like D more than C, but I'm going to fact check here. 0.2 for this one. 0.2 for this one. True so far. Silicone fibers resulted in 0.74 silicone fibers. I like D. We're contrasting it, and I like this. Why don't we like C, though? They do have different rates, but this is weak because it's just stating that there's a difference, but it doesn't specifically contrast it. Kind of a weak explanation. A plan to do both. It's focusing on like the use, not the rates, or contrast the emissivity itself. Additionally, I don't know where I would get the information for C, so I don't have support for this. And additionally, this doesn't really give me what the contrast is. It just states that there's a difference. So D is true. It aligns perfectly with what I've got, and I'll pick it and I'll move on. I want to emphasize the role a misconception played. So how did the misconception affect the naming of the place? Featured in a fictional island. That doesn't give me anything there. To the south was this, which was originally called this thing. No. Maybe. In the 16th century, Spanish explorers learned of a peninsula and called it California. That doesn't speak to how there was a misconception. Thinking it was an island, that immediately engages with what I think the role of misconception would be. Spanish explorers called a peninsula after, yes. So to the south of the United States, Baja California. There's no statement about misconception. I'm going to think that it's true. Thinking that it was an island. I'm skimming for thinking that it was an island. They called it California after an novel. The island is in quotes. That seems sassy. Learned of an island. Yes, this agrees with my statements. Learned of an island off this. Thinking it was an island. They named it. There was a misconception. 26 is absolutely going to be D. Emphasize the aim of the research study. What is the aim? So, what is the aim of the study? The study's aim. As it orbited the moon, that was later analyzed. No, this is some sort of like methodology. Before 2008, wondered if the moon was. I like this. Wondered if aim. This is like an observation, aimy thing. I like that. Cosmochemist set out to determine, that's aim language, whether some of moon's oxygen was coming from Earth. These feel like they're kind of the same. Besides, so moon was receiving some of its oxygen from Earth. Some of moon's oxygen, moon was receiving some of its oxygen was sending. Earth was sending oxygen. Earth was sending. So they're making the same claim here. It's just about the language of like wondered if versus set out to determine. And there's something about this year too. I like C because set out to determine really matches the language of the aim of the study. Wondered if could just be an idea, especially with this 2008. I'm going to look to the notes. In 2008 is when the study happened. Yeah, this could. So I'm going to say that B is wrong because this clue is helping me. If we were to think of the entire process, the aim of the study itself is this set out determined. This maps onto this. Whereas B is referencing some time period before the aim of the study. So this is like his observations in the natural world, which just feels disconnected, even though it's the same idea. So it feels like it's tapping into the before the codified aim of the research study. And then I move on to the final one. Study determined that Earth is sending a small amount of oxygen to the moon. No, that's the results. Out of my face, start at the start. I'm going to look for a signal element. I've got a colon right here. Many significant accomplishments. He did a bunch of beautiful stuff. He seemed to be important because of significant. I'm looking for a context clue. I don't see anything there. Following a technique. That participle can be a technique that originated. He skillfully winds, but I don't know if it's B or C, so I keep reading. And I eventually get to create another signal element. Let's cross our fingers and hope. Sorry, this one relates to this one. To create the signature look that no factory can reproduce. Two's got to be handmade. I go back to see some sort of context clue or signal element. I see nothing in this sentence. Most artists prefer working alone and given. This is going to be a signal element. Working together cost them their friendship. Perhaps the best known of the few examples of it's there working together. So it's going to be collaboration. I see a signal element immediately here. Realist and impressional painters around the world employed his technique. I'm going to plug that in here. It was hardly not around the world, restricted to, confined to seems to be the best word for this one. I'm going to go for a immediate. I see this, for example, signal element is going to bounce me to a context clue on this side. People can take simple steps. That doesn't get anything, so I keep reading. After travel, to avoid. Ooh, I love this. An exemplification of the ability to avoid, therefore preventable. And now we're going to see a text structure. So I'm going to start at the start and define as I go, summarize the sentence function as I go. Sentence one, companies are providing customers with more. What the state of the world. It's like a, okay. Sentence two, whether buying, an example of what is meant by commercial. And remember, if you can do this in your head, don't do this. I'm just doing this to kind of slow myself down and show. In turn, effect. In turn, companies profit too. It profits. So it's a good thing for both parties. It profits. Studies have shown that consumers pay more. However, still means however, in this environment, it can still be rough to juggle customs profits versus mass production. So this seems to be the outline of the text. I'm going to start going into it because I feel like I understand it. It does not discuss several recent innovations. It describes the companies. It does not focus on the scope of a singular company. I don't remember that being. It introduces a trend, state of the world. I like that. And then explains how the trend both benefits and poses a challenge. I had those things. There's the benefit. And however, I like C. It presents two contrasting product marketing techniques and then provides an example. No, it just talks about custom for a whole bunch and then introduces mass production at the end. So I don't really even have to juggle that. The sequence is all off. Main purpose, ugh. In one of these, we just have to kind of go in order and do our best. That seems like a chunk, so I'm going to summarize him first. There shall be new things happen. That's going to be my summary for this. Let's go for this one. Men's eyes shall have fresh seeing, gray lives reprise new experiences, I think. Then I keep reading. This will take us to here. Let's use a different color. But however, contrast the signal element. That's the only thing I've got so far that I think I fully understand. But under the new sun's being, but on a new day, completing one night again, there will be the same backbending on a new day, same hard work and sadness can repeat, I think. When the night finding its ending, a day shall have come. Cycle repeats. Seem to be the end. Seems to be cycle repeats. All right. Whew. That's tough. To consider the repetitiveness, I like this so far. Cycle repeats. Inherent in human life can be both rewarding and challenging. I guess that this works. I've got the challenge for sure. The rewarding, I guess, maps onto fresh seeing, but I'll keep reading. To question whether activities completed at one time of the day are more memorable. No, this loses the cycle repeats concept, and I don't think that I have a comparison about the task's value. To refute the idea that joy is more commonly experienced emotion than sadness is, I don't know where that would be derived from. This is whack. To refute the idea that joy is, that's rough. To demonstrate how the experiences of individuals relate to the experiences of the community. I don't know where I'm getting this scope at all. All I've got is this. I've got the notion of cycle. I absolutely know that I'm engaging with the challenges, and then the rewardings must be new roads wending, right? New beating drum, fresh seeing. That must be the positivity, and then the cycle repeats. Inherent to human life, A is going to be it, and then we can move on. Structure of the test, so I'll do it the exact same way. Let's script this first guy. NCP defined, only discernible. This is like the problem. Then inspired by nature, led nerds to make a method to locate NCP. This is like the specific tech of how the polyhedric, which rotates around the sun. Then we've got a semicolon, so I'll put that here. The temporal variance, how the result happens. So we've got 3 sentences. Woof, kind of complicated. Let's see. Let's do our best. Oh my gosh. It illustrates how most navigational tools utilize. No, it doesn't. It defines it, then it talks about nature. I have no idea. Yeah, I'm going to kill A from this first part. Get out of my face. Because these go in order. That speaks to the structure in order, right? Notice like the and then there, the order matters. It presents a celestial-based method of navigation. I think so. Enumerates the comparative benefits of an alternative method used by certain. Sure, it happens during the daytime. And then indicates how researchers assess the relative accuracy of the 2 methods. I do not, in my summary, believe that this sentence compares the 2. No, absolutely. So this falls most confidently for me in the final part. Moving on to C, it explains how the NCP is typically located. I don't think that it does that. It explains how the NCP is typically located. I guess looking up at night. Emphasizes a key difference, sure, night versus day, and then suggests an alternative way of using to improve navigational. I don't like this first part. I'm going to read D. It notes an obstacle to observing an astronomical phenomena, only discernible at night. Good. Mentions a navigational abilities. Yes, absolutely. That's the participle at the start. Use the obstacle to mimic that 100%. It's not speaking to, yeah. So it doesn't speak to, I don't like the typically, a key difference. That might be true, but then I don't like this final part either. D is going to be the right answer. Pick it and move on. What's the main idea of the text? Let's read the last sentence first, since this isn't a crazy poem. Long goodbye to many, beloved for a hot minute, book and author have impacted writing about snacks. Then I'm going to start at the start and just read through so that I have a general understanding, but I'm going to make sure I fit everything through the lens of this beloved by many. She is known for TV and radio, but signal element, huge, take that into consideration, is likely her but her book be her biggest make. The 19 book, the blah 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 blah. The book was different. Then we have the manner in which it was different. The manner in which it was different. So let's see what we've got. Signal elements logged, right? We don't want to drop this. So the unconventional book is an important, yeah, I like A a lot. That's totally a main idea, but we're going to keep reading. Held many different, she did do that, but this is putting both of these on equal playing fields, ignores my signal element there and ignores my conclusion. Groundbreaking book, okay, I like this. Didn't receive the praise it deserved. Long admired by many. No, long admired by many. The book was long admired by many. She's not saying that it wasn't there. Long admired by many. I disagree with that statement that C's making. Smart. Oh, sorry. She was a talented chef. True. No, this would be saying like, no. We've lost the signal element. We've lost the focus of the book. Cook for themselves. Absolutely. It's about the book. A gets my pick. What point does Prospero most directly make about Miranda, Mother Miranda, and her memories? What does he say about Miranda and her memories? Oh no. If we're having these two speakers speak, what is he saying about Miranda and her memories? I'm going to start with him because I shouldn't need to know what she's saying because it's a text details question and I'm going to narrow my focus here. So, oh no. Thou hadst and more, Miranda. Thou hadst and more, Miranda. But how is it that this lives in thy mind? I don't know that first part, but Miranda, how can you... This lives... Think of this. How can you think of this? He asks her. How can you think of this? What else? What else? What else? What seest thou else? What else can you see in the dark backward? What else can you remember? Okay, not too bad so far. If thou rememberest how... Oh my gosh. If thou rememberest aught ere thou camest here... I don't know what this word ought means. I know ought is like a modal verb. You ought not steal. But I have no idea. If thou rememberest where thou camest here... Thou rememberest that how thou camest here. Where you came from. If you remember where you came from, if you remember where, maybe if you remember where, then you can remember how. So I'm doing my best out here. Play as this is what even now, never look at the top, but like this is some Shakespeare nonsense. We're in the blender. I think this is what it's saying. If you remember where, then you can remember how. Maybe, right? Maybe. He's like guessing this thing. This is all I've got from this. Now, I doubt highly that if I read whatever the heck is up here, that I'll have any better understanding of what he's saying. Maybe this first part, but I'm going to try my fight here. Man, poems, plays, Shakespeare's a blender. Miranda's reminiscences, okay, we have reminiscences about her early childhood, have a melancholy quality that betrays her disconnected view. This, I have nothing to support this in my summary, it falls. Miranda's doubts about the accuracy of one recollection of a place other than the island are clouding her judgment. No, he's asking, no, not reluctant to no, Miranda's doubts about the accuracy of one recollection of a place other than the island. Clouded judgment seem to be making her reluctant to explore a recollection of traveling to the island. Miranda's doubts about maybe this first part? I don't know. I'm going to go past 10 and look at C. Miranda's abilities to summarize details of an experience she had before arriving on the island suggests that she may also be able to... Yes, this matches onto what I have. What else can you remember? How can you think? What else can you remember? If you remember where, then you can remember how. This maps on best here. When I come back to this, and it's not... I don't have any doubts for her. Yeah, maybe B's focusing too much on Miranda's. It's as if the question was saying Miranda must directly make about her own memories. C's focusing on what he's saying. He's saying that if you remember the before, maybe you can remember how, right? What else can you remember? This sentence I'm going to lock into my extrapolation. I really like C. Person is vague because she's remembering a scenario. No. I don't like this. C is going to be my choice. I pick it and move on. Which quotation from a work by historian would support the student's claim? So these are from historians, students' claim. What's the claim? A student criticizes historians, claiming that they have evaluated him as a symbol, not of an actions. So we want to work from a historian wherein they evaluate as a symbol rather than actions. Okay? It's a different figure to evaluate the striking. No, this is just that he was maybe a controversial person. The development makes political beliefs and ways were consistent. No, this is just that he was a good politician's practical accomplishment can be passed over quickly. It is mainly as the personification Absolutely, personification as a symbol. Many questions remain about his ultimate vision without new evidence coming to light these questions. No, this is maybe that he was a bad politician. C is going to be our choice. We want the researcher's hypothesis. I see a hypothesis here. Let's start chunking what we've got. Hypo, the hypo is what? Dusky sharks led to EO decline. I'm going to go to my items. Declines in the regional abundance of dusty sharks prey other than cow-nose rays. I don't know where cow-nose rays or other preys are coming into, so I'm going to go to the text because I have no idea what's going on, and I see in B that there are cow-nose rays. So D, dusky sharks do not eat eastern oysters, but do concern dusty sharks eat cow-nose rays. Cow-nose rays eat oysters. So I would expect there a decline in the population of dusky sharks. We want to see that, and we also want to see a spike in the increase of rays, because then that would decline the eastern oyster. So that's the chain. Sharks down, oysters up. Sharks down, rays up, oysters down. The declines in the regional abundance of dusky sharks other than cow-nose rays are associated with I can see a decline here. That matches my idea that they would want to go down. I don't know what this is going into, but I'll table him, come back to him. Eastern oyster abundance tend to be greater in areas with both dusky sharks and cow-nose rays than in areas with only dusky. No. If there were only dusky sharks, I would expect there to be an explosion of eastern oysters. Consumption by eastern oysters by cow-nose in the region substantially decreased before the regional decline. No. If it happened before, I wouldn't be able to say that the decline in dusky shark, this is messing up the sequence. It wouldn't show that the decline in dusky sharks led to the thing on the right. Cow-nose rays have increased in regional abundance. I love this answer for D. D is going to be the right answer. I want to go back to A and think about why it's wrong. No, declines in the regional assumption. I don't like where it's getting this like other prey nonsense, but even if I were to plug it in, so if other preys were to go down, dusky sharks would eventually take an L, but they wouldn't take an L until they had killed all of the cow-nose rays, because they would go down together. Then I would imagine that the death of the cow-nose rays would lead to an explosion of oysters. That's totally going to be the right answer. Logically completes the text. Let's go into it. This suggests, so I'm going to go back a sentence. Obviously, I'm reading, however, Green also explained that he had seen earlier versions of Hadestown in 2016 had, 2016 had confusing storytelling. Okay, let's go into it. The 2000 had fewer storytelling. Nope, that's flipping the exact opposite of what I know. Hadestown should have had a larger production than it actually did. No, I don't think so, but I'll table it. The 2019 version of Hadestown was less enjoyable. Less enjoyable. Less enjoyable than this. No. Why would you? Confusing storytelling wouldn't extract more enjoyment. So I've got B and D on the table, and I'm looking to 13 now for the solve here. Improved greatly. That's exactly what I have evidence on. Bad storytelling in 16. If to know it was bad, it had to have improved, but I'm going to go back a sentence to confirm it. In a review, Theater Critic Enthusiastic praised the musical storytelling. This has to be the change. I go back a sentence and I have it here. I absolutely have the notion that there was change. I'm going to logically complete the text. I'm going to read this sentence and see what I've got. If both artifact dates and the 14th century founding date are correct, so artifact date, not 14th century, founding date, 14th century. I know this because if both were 14, then the detail, for parallel structure, we would slide this back one. So I just want to make sure that my hypothesis is correct. So I'm going to read more of the text to find the artifact date not being in the 14th century. There's no other evidence. It doesn't say it there. If some date from the 13th century, exactly. So it's saying that the artifacts were found in the 13th century, and the founding date is the 13th century, and we're moving chronologically kind of like from time from left to right. I'm going to engage now. Artifacts from the 14th century are more commonly recovered than artifacts from the 13th century. No, A is trying to get me to make the confusion that I recognized right at the start of this thing with the list. A falls, right? Artifacts and founding date. Founding is speaking to like the founding of the settlement itself. That sentence is saying that. That's trying to get me to confuse those things. The artifacts originated elsewhere and eventually reached this. The artifacts. Yes, I like this. I like the way that B is looking. They have different settlement dates. So since the artifacts were from an earlier time, they must have came from a different place. C was founded by people from a different region than previously assumed. No. Nowhere, and I have the notion of people. This final sentence is all talking about when, not a who. And when I read the previous sentence, I don't have the notion that there would be a who. I just have artifacts came from a different place. C falls. inadvertently damaged? No, that's kind of trash. I don't know why you'd get that detail. Our final question, 2 minutes to spare. So much time, too much time. These findings suggests, let's just go straight to the previous sentence and see what we've got. Bird studier, Schultz and others have found, they found that our birds use microstructures in their feathers, use microstructures to appear to have deep saturation without having to have K-rich diets. So they found that the birds use microstructures in the ring to appear to have deep saturation without having to have the carotenoid-rich diet. So I see that, however, it's going to kick me back one, but I'm low on time, so I'm going to try to fight my fight as I can. Individual male teenagers can engage in honest signaling. I don't know what honest signaling means without relying on carotenoid. I agree with that statement. I'm going to go back for a moment to see what honest signaling is. The deeply saturated colors generally serve to communicate what is known as honest signaling. So if they eat, they can have health benefits. If cart rich, then honest health. So I think that this is making a lie, but I'm going to just table that concept and move on. Maybe less effective than deeply saturated feathers. No, it's creating the appearance, so it's simulating it just fine. I have no claim that the scientists are saying that it doesn't work. Scientists have yet to determine why they have a preference. I don't remember anything about like why they would like it. They were just taking it as a grant that they do like it. Then I read D, a male tanager's appearance may function as a dishonest signal. Yes. So what I thought at first, an honest signaling would mean that they don't have to manipulate light. Dishonest would say that they are manipulating light in order to be signaling to the honeys that they're attractive, and that's definitely going to be the right answer. So in order to get some women in their lives, these teenagers are being absolutely dishonest, and that is unacceptable. Animals, do better next time. But that's it. GG's.